Hello and welcome to another episode of Pakistonomy. This is an episode that's going to take us a bit deeper into one of the most informal, ununderstood, or poorly understood segments of Pakistani society, which is the trash economy. And a lot of work has happened in understanding this sector, but in mainstream media, it's rarely covered. The only time you'd hear about Pakistan's trash problem is when cities like Karachi or other large metropolitan areas literally sink under a pile of garbage. And so to talk about this today with me, I have with me Ahmad Shabbar. Ahmad is the founder and CEO of GarbageCAN, an organization that provides waste management solutions to several schools and businesses. It does work in the recycling management business with established restaurants and works with households to have a door-to-door program to grow awareness of and start increased recycling of products across many parts of Karachi. Ahmad, first of all, thank you for taking out the time. And I want you to first begin by talking a bit about GarbageCAN and what the mission and vision of the organization is before we jump into what you've learned about the trash economy over the years.
Right. Thank you so much, Uzair, for having me. Well, today's Bar Rabbil Awwal and everything as well. But and as they say, Safai nis iman hai. But we won't go into the religious aspects of it, and we're gonna go straight into like how trash works in Karachi and Pakistan. Okay, so GarbageCAN I started in about 2016, and I started that because for the last 2 or 3 years before that, about 2014, 2015, there was a lot of noise, or there's usually a lot of noise every couple of years about what people want to do about trash, the some segments of society then blame others, or the opposition blames the government that they're not fixing the trash problem, and so on and so forth. But in the 2015 2016 time, there's another organization called Fix It, and they had really hyped up the issue. And for example, they dumped trash in front of the governor's house and so on and so forth as well. I was in the US till, from 2008 to 2016, and then I moved back to Pakistan in 2016. And I went and met with the head of the organization, Mr. Alamgir Khan, the who's currently an M&A now. And I asked him, like, why is he not going towards a more sustainable solution? Because he was raising the trash issue. So I asked him why he wasn't proposing a more sustainable solution to it. But he said that, okay, yes, we're trying to get into it, we'll think about it, and so on and so forth. And that's when I realized that I'm not so sure about whether they're really serious, because the chief minister was saying that we need to solve the trash issue as well. The mayor was saying we need to solve the trash issue as well. So I just quietly went about starting my own small entity called GarbageCAN. Even though actually the head of the Sindh Solid Waste Management Board had told me that all trash belongs to the Sindh province, so no local company can really work within this sphere. So I was like, all right, like I'm not going to work with the districts or the cities and everything. I will work directly with organizations. So currently, that's how I started GarbageCAN, and then I started following the scavengers. I started following the jamadars, the sweepers. I ended up in the Afghan colony. I ended up in Jam Chakra, Ibrahim Hedri. These two are the largest landfills in Karachi. And then I learned quite a lot about the informal sector, the formal sector, about the recycling industry, the waste management industry. And since then, I've been formally learning more about waste management as well. So currently, GarbageCAN has three main services. I guess, like I call it the GarbageCAN ARC. It's lucky that they made that the ARC, the abbreviation. So A stands for awareness. As you mentioned, we go to universities, schools, even 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds. We do activities with them, and even professionals as well. And R stands for recycling management, which is purely recyclable items, cardboard, plastic bottles, aluminum, metal, other metal, and so on. And then C is comprehensive waste management, where we manage the entire waste of whatever organization that we're working with.
So that you there is, growing up in Karachi, I remember and seeing, not fully understanding, but seeing and noticing that there is a
Mhm.
whole underclass associated with waste and waste management and recycling. You've been to the big sites where this happens, and I remember
Mhm.
speaking to you, and you had some stories to share about how there is a whole criminal element associated with it, works in
Yeah.
collusion with governments or political leaders and things like that,
Mhm.
not at the big level, but at the local micro level. So just
Mhm.
tell the person who's listening who doesn't understand much about the waste economy in a place like
Okay.
Karachi, and it replicates across Pakistan. How does this really work? Like, how does someone's trash, that a jamadar or a sweeper that picks up from your home, end up in this
Mhm.
landfill site, and what all happens to this trash in the process, and after it ends up in this landfill site?
Okay. First of all, what I'm going to say is, like, initially when we were starting this conversation, you mentioned that the waste management industry in Karachi isn't very well understood. The issue is that it is very well understood, but not much is being done about it. And that's where I believe the criminal element like comes in as well, or like even a little bit of the incompetence of the people that are in charge, or like there aren't any proper policies and so on and so forth. So I'll start with, like, when you start pulling at the thread of of the garbage issue, you get to child labor, which is extremely obvious, because there's several 8 to 10 year olds with bags on their backs, and they're scavenging waste off of the streets and taking them to the recyclers and everything. Then there's women's role in managing waste as well, because about 73% of the primary waste managers in the world are women. And recycling, of course, like selling recyclable items because they hold value, um, like grants them or gives them extra resources that they can run their households with. Then there's like a perpetuation of drug addiction. Like if you walk along the streets of Karachi, you'll see many homeless people and like people who are addicted to drugs. They have plastic bags in their hands, and within those plastic bags, there's uh, you know aluminum cans, plastic bottles, and so on, which they sell in return for drugs, of course. Then associated with the child labor issue, there's also pedophilia involved, because a lot of these areas, they aren't very they aren't very well off, and like a child's value, I guess, is in what they can bring to the table, which would be either trash itself or, unfortunately, like I said, pedophilia. Then there's the security issue, and then there's also the mafia issue, because because there's value in recyclable items. There's a whole lot of turf wars involved, that this is where we're going to be picking up trash from, this is where we're going to be picking up trash from, and so on. So in 2017, the like in just within the USA, the recycling industry was worth $63 billion annually. So you can imagine how big, or how valuable the recyclable items are. And in Pakistan as well, almost 90 to 95% of the recyclables do get recycled. But the question is how they're getting recycled, because like all the issues that I mentioned. Oh, sorry, like I forgot. There's also the rural to urban migration issue, and then there's also the refugee crisis, because sorry, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. So yeah, so you can see how much money there's involved in it. So because of the refugee crisis and the rural to urban migration issue, there's a completely separate informal industry that's being run. And then, of course, there's the formal Sin Solid Waste Management Board, or KMC, or the public industries, or like the private industries that have been hired by the government. Those are being run. So for any waste management company to be successful, both general waste management or municipal waste management and recycling management need to go hand in hand. They need to be integrated, like they are in Singapore or Japan, or slowly they're moving towards that in the US as well. Whereas in Pakistan, they're completely split. The informal industry is looking at the recyclable items, and the formal industry is then laden with the burden of processing the waste that's basically useless. So,
Can I quickly interrupt here because it's just a follow-up question? So when
yeah.
someone comes to pick up trash at my family's home in Karachi, that's the CBC that comes in. They come in every few days, sometimes mostly on everyday basis. It's the jamadar who comes in, the janitor who takes care of the neighborhood, and he's an informal employee. He doesn't work with the government, right? But he goes to this designated spot and drops off everyone's trash over there. Now, from there is when the CBC picks it up and takes it to the landfill site, right? Now, is it, I presume that because the whole thing is separated, it's not like anyone in my neighborhood at least is recycling or sorting the recyclables out. So either the informal part of the system comes in at that drop-off spot outside the neighborhood where recyclables are picked out, or does it also happen at the landfill site, which is where the KMC or the CBC drops off its entire truckload and people work? Like what are the different points at which sort of, I wouldn't say they meet, but the two sides of the economy intersect with each other?
Both at the drop-off site outside, just outside your neighborhood, and at the landfill itself. Because so the drop-off sites outside your neighborhood, internationally they're known as transfer stations, or like that's how it's supposed to work. There's door-to-door collection, then there's smaller neighborhood transfer stations, then there are larger district-wide transfer stations, and then in the end they go to the landfill. That's how it's supposed to work. But as we've noticed in Karachi, most of the trash just goes out into the kachra kundis that are outside, and from there, slowly and steadily, about 60 to 70% of the waste makes its way to the landfills. So what happens at the kachra kundis, or the transfer stations, that's where this mafia thing and the scavenger thing becomes very obvious. That those kachra kundis, even though they're really unhealthy, and everybody tells everybody complains about them and wants them to be removed from the city, but those are rented out storage spaces basically. Who are they rented out to? The scavengers. Who are they rented by? We don't know. Because of course the CBC or the KMC or the Sin Solid Waste Management Board, or any of the 16 or 17 various organizations that are supposed to look after the municipal waste, again, that's a huge issue as well, like the coordination between the 16 organizations or 17 organizations and so on. But someone from those organizations rents out those storage spaces, or they should, if they're not renting it out, then they should remove it. What happens is the trash comes over there, the scavengers given about 2 to 3 days to pick up or pick out the recyclable items from there, and then the rest of the trash just lays there. And then after those 2 or 3 days, the CBC, or Sin Solid Waste Management Board, the public entity, they come in, they pick up the trash, and then they take it to the landfill. So what's happening over here is that the money, or the valuable items, the recyclable items, is going into the informal sector. They're paying rent to somebody within those organizations, and that rent is going into the pockets and not into the treasury or into the government sector. And then the public entity is basically burdened with picking up the trash and just taking it over there. Sure, they're getting taxes and stuff from the general population, but then again, that's very inefficient for any even public waste management company to be successful. Both the tax structure and the recycling thing needs to go hand in hand.
And so again, I'll put on my economics hat here before we go to the landfill side, which is, so someone is paying off somebody to own this transfer station essentially, right?
Right.
And then they use informal labor, mostly child labor, as we've all seen,
Right.
that goes with that big bag, and they in 2 days clean
Mm-hmm.
it out in whatever way they
Mm-hmm.
can. Meanwhile, they get the cuts on their
Mm-hmm.
feet and pick up diseases and all sorts of stuff. But
Exactly.
the rental for that space has a profit margin associated with it, because that's why the money keeps flowing. So
Right.
when I have grown up in Pakistan, those transfer stations, no new investments have occurred. It's just a four wall fence, essentially, with a big gap in
Mm-hmm.
between where the truck can come in and deposit the trash. So
Mm-hmm.
there is the resource and the monetization of that resource that has happened. The fact of the matter is that has happened formally. So the investments needed to upgrade the transfer
Mm-hmm.
station, so to speak, it does not happen because there's a whole underground economy linked to it, which means that we can continue to do
Right.
it the old school way. Am I right in that sense, that there is a resource revenue collection that's happening here? It's just that it's not been formalized to make it actually a better system to manage.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what I'm trying to push for as well. I want the informal sector to be integrated into the formal sector. That's how we can combine both the waste management and the recycling management industries. So, for example, one of the organizations that I worked with, I'm not going to name it because I've named it several times before. But one of the organizations that we used to work with, um, uh, a lot of scavengers used to come in over there. So when we offered that we'll start cleaning up over there as well, and we actually don't charge this organization for cleanups. We've basically adopted that space. The very first question that I was asked was, "What are we going to get in return?" And I told them, well, you're going to get a clean university in return. I mean, you should be paying us for the service of cleaning the space up, but you're going to get like a clean space in return. I actually let slip one word, but anyway,
Yeah.
well, that's okay. But then after about a week or so, like our one of our vehicles got towed, and then when I went in there, I got beaten up by about 5 or 6 of their guards. The reason why that happened was when the scavengers were picking up recyclable items from over there, they were just picking up the recyclable items. They were not cleaning the rest of the space, or they were not picking up trash from the rest of the space. So, for example, let's just say that they were picking up recyclables worth 100,000 rupees. Um, Even if they pay their guys' salaries and everything, they're left with 50-55,000 rupees, say. And when they and so with those 50,000 rupees, they can pay off the guards, or they can pay off whoever's in charge, or like of those guards. Whereas what we were doing was, and we're actually doing now, because that was way back in 2017, and we have a proper MOU with them now. What we're doing is we pick up the recyclables, and whatever money that we get from the recyclables, we hire sweepers and janitors from there, and we make sure that the space is clean. That space is clean. So we're not left with any money to give to anyone. And that's why they were pissed off initially, but then like eventually, now that the entire globe is moving towards sustainability and climate change and environmental friendly practices, like I think they came around. But that's where the mafia lies, and that's where the model of the transfer station, the existing model of the transfer station lies, which is why you see all of these kachra kundis in several neighborhoods, and nobody's doing anything about them.
So okay,
And
so
yes.
from the transfer station now, this trash pile that has come from my neighborhood, let's argue, has
Mm-hmm.
been in this transfer station for a couple of days. The scavengers have picked out whatever is valuable for them in their own way, and now it's dumped to
Mm-hmm.
the landfill site, right? So what happens
Mm-hmm.
now at the landfill site? Because I have again read about and heard that again there is a criminal element there. A lot of stuff happens on that landfill site as well, and you've been to these places. So just tell us a bit about what happens to this pile of trash that now finds itself into these two big landfill sites in Karachi.
Oh, there's definitely a whole economy over there as well, and a lot of scavengers have their homes over there as well. Like, and kids grow up that like they're born in those homes, and they grow up knowing just that job. So not like the process of the like that happens at the transfer stations, the scavenging process, that isn't entirely efficient, and there's a lot of recyclables that are left over, or like within that trash. So when that reaches the landfill sites, the remaining recyclable items get picked out. And also we need to keep in mind that there's other special wastes as well, such as electrical items, electronic items, or medical waste, and so on. There are stories as well, and like I've seen it a couple a couple times myself, that the medicinal waste, for example, syringes or drips and everything, we actually tried working with a hospital to start recycling them. Like what we were doing was we would just pick up the clean, the non-infectious, non-hazardous one. We were working with the infection control department, but in the end I had to stop it, because eventually even when we sent the clean drips onwards to get recycled, they were getting mixed with the remaining drips that were somehow reaching the landfills, and then the recycling sites such as Shirsha or Highway. So like how they're reaching those sites, I mean,
Well,
like again.
sometimes they wash ashore on Seaview in Karachi, and then you have Shanira Akram or Wasim Akram making a video before it gets cleaned up. So
Exactly, and I mean, and that's great that they make those videos, but then again, that's not a sustainable solution. And I'm hoping to create something that's long term and sustainable.
So that begs the question then. I mean, Karachi is a huge city. It has several,
Mhm.
a Byzantine governance model. The Sindh Solid Waste Management Authority has tried to do
Mhm.
things its own way. Contracts have been given to Chinese organizations. The CBC
Mhm.
runs its own thing. I would
Mhm.
argue, like, okay, in something like waste management, you need a coordinated system for sure, like a city like Karachi. But a
Absolutely. Mhm.
Byzantine system, at least in a situation where nothing exists, can lead to competition and innovation, where the CBC tries something new and KMC tries something new and someone else tries something new. But that we don't see
Mhm.
that in a city like Karachi either. So from your perspective, as someone who's worked in this industry, like, what are the major barriers for why Karachi does not have a integrated solid waste management program overall? It's been decades that this is an issue that's been going on. So
Mhm.
and there is money, as you clearly explained, in the entire process to be made. There's a business plan to be executed. So why is it
Mhm.
that we're still where we are?
I think it's because of political will, and also it's just easier to run this system as it's being run, because nobody really has to take responsibility in that sense. Even though this like the public sector, or those in charge, the powers that be, they do have to take responsibility. But now people are so unfortunately so used to living in within trash, that they don't really care much. And then like every now and then you see that there's like, let's keep Karachi clean drive. Oh, there's another cleanup drive going on at the beach or somewhere else. So the people see these efforts, and they're like, oh, like they're doing such a good job. So basically they're playing politics with the trash issue. Like if you remember, just recently, Mayor Wasim Akhtar challenged the ex mayor, Mustafa Kamal, that, oh, if you can clean up trash within like a few days, I'll give you my entire force and everything. And then he did give him the entire force, and instead of
For a hot
actually
second.
setting it, yeah, exactly, for a complete day he did that, and then he took all the force back. So I mean, it's that's what it is. And then with those 16 or 17 or how many various organizations that are working in, they do not coordinate. The CBC, as you know, is under, I mean, it's under the cantonments, and that's where the military comes in. Sindh Solid Waste Management Board is provincial, and that's where Pakistan People's Party comes in. KMC is, of course, was mainly run by MQM and so on, the local governments. So as you know, that they're political opponents, and yes, I am calling the military political as well, because, well, that's how it is. So they don't want to coordinate, whereas how it should be and how it is globally, it's like, as you said, it's integrated. the federal government or the national government, they set out guidelines. Guidelines could be as simple as we want things done in an environmentally friendly manner, and we want to avoid or we want to mitigate the effects of climate change. Then the provincial government, the state government, they basically create policies according to those guidelines. The policies could be as simple as recycling, like everybody has to recycle. Like it could be as simple as that. All medical waste will be properly recycled, will be properly cleaned up, and like either incinerated or recycled, and or plastic bottles will be recycled, or the Liari or the Korangi Nadi, like instead of dumping plastic bags and everything in there, you will pull out those plastic bags and so on. One of the policies that Sindh government recently made was that the microns of the plastic bags will be increased, so that the amount of plastic bags like are reduced, and the value of the recyclables within those plastic bags, the recycled plastic, that's increased. So a lot more plastic is getting recycled. So that's one example of a policy. And then the third will be the local government. Say like if there's six, or they were going to create a seventh district as well in Karachi. Every district will have like a separate company that's working, or even if there's one company working in all 6 or 7 districts, then they will be responsible in actually carrying out the waste management, and they'll be answerable to the provincial government and or like authority, and that provincial authority will be answerable to the federal authority. So my basic demand is, the very minimum demand is that we need to stop playing politics with trash, and I think everything else will fall in place.
And so, I mean, again, you're saying the same thing that I heard yesterday or day before yesterday from a couple of guests. The conversation was on taxes collected out of Karachi and how Karachi's markets pay far, far, far more than any other markets in the country. And again, we were like, well, if Karachi, there's no resource constraint, seemingly, then why is public service deliveries poor? And the answer was, well, it's a political economy issue. And I hear you saying the same thing in a place like Karachi. But again, it seemed that there was a breaking point this monsoon season. You were out in defense and in Kharadar and different parts of the city, pumping literally sewage out of people's homes, and it affected defense as much as, if not more so, than the other parts of the city. And so there was this elite barrier was broken down. Do you think, from your experience being on the ground and doing all this work during the monsoon season, that there has been an awakening among segments of society that this is a structural issue that they need to fight structurally, versus just do a clean the sea view drive and get a bunch of tractors to come in and pick up the trash? Or is it still, are we back to business as usual after the damage that was done under the rainfall?
Well, well, it's funny, as far as the CVU cleanup drives and everything are concerned. You have to get sometimes you have to get an NOC when there are larger organizations involved. So as soon as you get an NOC, the very day, like the night before, the CBC sends their tractors and everything and cleans up that area. So by the time the citizens are there to clean up, there's nothing left to clean up. So it's funny, but like I think there has been a bit of an awakening, but at the same time, I feel like it might move towards again political blame game, where PTI followers have started blaming the Sindh government or People's Party, and the People's Party followers blame MQM, and then MQM blames so the followers are blaming each other now. But there has been an awakening, and I feel like if things don't change in the next year or so, or at least if there needs to be a show that the government has made some efforts, because if no efforts whatsoever are made and the same thing happens next year, I think that'll be a breaking point, and a lot more people will be out on the streets protesting than they were right now.
And so from that perspective, then, between now and then, and the test will come obviously when the next rainfalls come in the monsoon season,
Mhm.
What are you doing in terms of whether with GarbageCAN or outside of it, working with other organizations in terms of building grassroots awareness? I know we talked about sort of the
Mhm.
recycling part of your arc, but on the
Mhm.
awareness side, like what does that look like? What kind of response do you get from
Mhm.
communities that you engage with or organizations that you engage with? Do they get that this is a problem that they need to play a role in, or is it still like a convincing
Mhm.
barrier that you first have to cross?
Now it's a lot more easier to convince them, but there is a slight convincing barrier, but it's much less than it was before previously, and now it's much better because the climate action movements like are very strong in or they're starting to get very loud. At least in Karachi, last year when we did the climate march, there were about 5,000 people that had come out and so on. And one of the things that we're like again in my very small capacity, I'm not a very big organization, we're a very small organization. In my very small capacity, one of the things that I'm doing right now is we're trying to create a recycling and composting and community garden facility in an area called Shah Faisal Colony. Over there we're going to be recycling, and we're going to be working with the community and everything as well, but we're going to try and sort that in a cleaner manner, so that kids from various schools, even KGS or Lyceum or other schools and colleges or universities can come in and actually see how that happens. um, and then we're starting composting as well, and composting will be happening right there too, so kids can see that as well, and then that compost will be used to make that community garden where the local community of Shah Faisal will be able to pick out vegetables and fruits and whatever from there as well. So that's our awareness bit, and I'm hoping, because part of what I'm trying to do is to show new professionals or university students that this is a viable profession to get into, to enter, because a lot of people don't like it because it's not clean, or there's not a lot of money in it, or it's informal, or there's security issues and everything. But I'm trying to hopefully make it feasible enough that people would be interested in joining this industry. And also, if you've recently seen, I believe World Bank gave 200. I'm not sure if it was $200 million or if it was. I believe it was $200 million to Sindh government to create to solve the waste management issue. And I feel like that's very easily done, because when I visited you the first time I met you, like I guess in DC, I was on a tour of the US just going to landfills. So I'd been to a landfill in Los Angeles, I'd been to a landfill in Dallas, a materials recovery facility in Dallas, and I was supposed to do that in New York as well, but then COVID hit, unfortunately. Um, so for about 14 to 20 million dollars, you can easily cater to a population of about 10 lakh or 20 lakh people very easily, or even more if you do it properly. So if the Sindh government is serious about it, they can at least try and create a proper landfill. I'm talking about a scientific landfill where the leachate is removed, where the gas is removed, and energy is created as well. And there's a proper materials recovery facility right next to it. So but a materials recovery facility is basically the point where recyclable items are pulled out of the waste. So we're already doing it, but we're doing it in such an informal, unhealthy manner, and it's open dumping that it's almost it causes a lot more damage than it actually helps. So there are ways for the Sindh government or the local government or even the federal government to show seriousness, and I hope that they do so as well in the next year.
And I think you're right, right? It's not that expensive. Like you've been to my place in DC. It's a 4 apartment building, and we
Yeah.
have a private company that comes in twice a week to pick up our trash and recycling, and we have to sort it out and put it in different baskets.
Mhm.
It costs for the building $160 a month. So that's like
Mhm.
$40 per apartment. It's not even in rupee terms. If you just directly convert and ask a household how much they spend on someone picking up the trash and then cleaning up their surrounding areas and all of that as a
Mhm.
community, it's pretty much the same amount, if not a bit more, I would say. In terms of how much you spend overall if you add up all the pieces together of how you keep your community clean. So clearly the business model is not that expensive, and the upfront investment needed is in facilities and materials, or the
Yeah.
equipment that you need. But then if you have monthly recurring revenue coming in from households that have to partake in this service,
Mhm.
it's not that hard to solve, especially if the World Bank's giving you money. So I think it's more of a willingness to solve versus a resource constrained issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, globally, the waste management industry is worth 264 or 265 billion dollars right now, and by 2024, it's supposed to rise to 330 billion dollars. So, I mean, there is a lot of money involved. It's just about how well you do it, and like, I mean, what facilities you're providing and so on. But then again, if you think about it, sure, there are like, I mean, it's about political will, but like, I feel like the reason why they don't move towards it is because then they'll have to resolve a lot of those other issues that they're trying to ignore. For example, the refugee crisis. So like, most of the people in the recycling industry, they're Afghan refugees, or they were Afghan refugees, and now their kids are doing it and were born in Pakistan. But they're not citizens. They don't get ID cards, so they cannot register companies. So when they cannot register companies, they cannot pay taxes, and they need a way to live, of course. So they get involved with the informal industry. So in order to actually bring them into the formal industry, they will have to do something about the refugees. They will either have to call them Pakistani citizens, or they will have to give them some sort of work permits. So I think that's it's something to that effect that's actually stopping them. But then again, what's also stopping them is then, of course, like, if the money that some people are making actually starts going to the government, then they're going to be a lot the
A
corrupt
lot,
people
a
are going to be
lot
a
more
lot poorer.
Ahmads are gonna get beaten up for disrupting the status quo. You
Exactly.
talked about money being there in the system. What are some of the most valuable things that are picked out of the trash and recycled, that people actually
Yeah.
like aggressively search for in the pile?
So there's three main categories: paper, plastic, metal, of course. And as far as municipal waste is concerned, and I'm not going to talk about industrial waste, because industrial waste is, again, like a special kind of waste. But so as municipal waste is concerned, there's cardboard and paper, and which is raddi paper and everything. And cardboard is like sought after because there's so much of it, and like in and almost every shop has it, and every say imtiaz store, which is basically like Walmart over here, like they have it in huge quantities and everything as well. Then there's plastic PET bottles, because like, everybody drinks Nestle, Coke, Pepsi, whichever. And then there's metal, aluminum cans. Again, Coke, Pepsi, or any other canned drink. So aluminum is the most expensive one within solid waste management board. So it'll be anywhere between 110 to 130 rupees per kg, and that's about 100 120 cans as well, the 250 ml cans. Plastic bottles are about, they like, the price actually varies with season. So in the summers, because a lot more people drink these beverages, so there's a lot more on the streets, so the price of the plastic bottles is cheaper. Whereas during the winters, not many people drink these cold drinks and everything, so the price of the plastic bottles goes up. So right now, like, as we speak, yesterday and today and tomorrow as well, like, I believe that there's an entire discussion going on, and like, as to what the price of plastics would be. It's interesting that this informal industry behind the scenes is
Who
very
sets the
organized.
price? Who sets the
Exactly.
price?
Exactly. The all the larger store like all the larger recyclers or the waste suppliers as they call themselves, they get together. There's an entire organization and everything as well, and then they set the price. There are also formal industries. For example, Chazelle was a huge formal recycling company, and what they used to do is they used to purchase all of these plastic bottles and everything, and then hot wash them and then sell them to China. So that's another thing as well of interest, like as far as so what we've been talking about right now is the economics within Karachi or within Pakistan. But all of these recyclable items used to go to China first. But in the last 2 to 3 years, China has stopped taking recyclable
Yeah, it's
items.
become a
Or
big issue here in the United States as well, because a lot of it would go to China from here.
exactly, and that's what I noticed in March as well when I was visiting Dallas landfills and materials recovery facility. A lot of the recyclable items were just lying there. Otherwise, they would have gone all the way to China. So what's actually happening is that China used to allow 10% of waste. And by waste, I mean if for example there's a plastic bottle that you're drinking out of, and there's a little bit of the drink left, so that's waste weight or water weight. So China would allow about 10% of waste weight or water weight initially, but then the last 2 or 3 years they've they've made their policy a lot more stricter, and they're like, we will only allow 1% of waste or water weight in.
And so
So
how do
which
they
is
measure that really quickly? Like, is it just the whole bulk of this bag of water bottles that is then put on a scale and they say, okay, this is how much it should
yeah.
weigh. And if it exceeds, it's not okay.
Yeah, exactly. Because everybody knows like how much what's it called plastic is goes in one plastic bottle, right? And when they melt the plastic down, they have to remove they have to remove the tags. They also have to remove plastic that is different from the plastic like industry that's set. For example, like a PET bottle is different from the cap that goes on top of the bottle.
Hmm.
So yeah, and then they have to remove the water and everything as well. So they're able to measure the before and after removing the waste. So that's what's happening, and the entire global market or global industry will shift. The markets will move from China to countries like Pakistan, India, South Asia, because I'm not so sure if the USA or UK are going to set up recycling facilities and process their own trash, and also because processing trash over there is going to be a lot more expensive than just sending it over to poor countries like us and only having us process their trash. So like recently I was talking to one of the largest plastic PET bottle manufacturers, and he mentioned that Coke and Pepsi by 2023 2025 want to go to about 30 to 50% of recycled PET bottles. They're called rPET. So a lot more industries are gonna go up in Pakistan as well, like the final recycling breaking down industries, and not just hot washing or flakes industries.
So again, there's an employment and an economic argument to be made for building up this sector, and it's a
Yeah.
human argument to be made as well, because as we talked about earlier, you have children, informal workers working in this segment, and they need to be formalized, educated if you're a child, etc., to make sure that they have the right opportunities and are not taken advantage of. I'm mindful of time, but like you mentioned that you got beaten up at a place that you were trying to disrupt. I've heard
Right.
some crazy stories from you when we met in March. So, but for the
Right.
audience, like share a couple of interesting and crazy stories that you now look back on and say, wait a minute, I did not imagine that this is what would happen to me as I tried to like get a cleaner Karachi built in
Right.
on my own.
Right. Well, that was one of the stories. The other one was I had just come back from the US in about April 2016, and I started doing my research and everything in October, November, and I was following these scavengers, the kids and stuff, and like however xenophobic. I mean, like I hope it doesn't sound xenophobic, but it does. I'm pretty sure that most of the informal sector is being run by the Afghans. So I started following these Afghan kids, and I ended up in the Afghan colony. And by when I say colony, I mean actual colony where the women and children live. And these like and I was wearing a jeans and t-shirt, and I just drove up and like with my sunglasses and everything as well, and shoes and stuff, and I just got out, and I'm like, okay, what's going on? And I'm just looking around. So there's one Afghan guy, he comes up and he grabs my arm and he points to my skin and he's like, "Aapko mashwara bhi kisne diya कि यहाँ पे आए?" Okay, like he just points to my skin and he's like, "Who even advised you to come in over here?" Because they're very private people, and like it's especially going into the colonies where the women and children are. Like those guys were really pissed off. But then, but then I told them I tried to, I was like, "Hey, I'm just here to get work done. I want to work with you and so on." So oh, acha kaam ke liye. Oh, acha, you're here for business. So they took me to their guest house and stuff, and then we sat down and we talked business and so on. Another thing that happened was nobody would let me into the storage spaces because they're very protective. Of course, they're not following any standards. There's no licenses. There's nothing. So they're really protective of their business. So I would go and ask them what the price was, and somebody would say, "Oh, it's 2 or 3 rupees," whereas in actuality it would be about 20, 25 rupees per kilo. So again, wearing jeans and t-shirt, or like sometimes now even shalwar kameez and everything, I was like, okay, maybe I need to. So I go in there and they're like, they won't let me in. I would go and I was like, "My name is Ahmad. I would like to." No worries. So one day I went with my driver and I told them that, "Hey, I'm going to be sitting in the car. You go inside and you tell them that Haji Saab is here to pick up to speak with your manager." And that's what he did. And the manager comes running out. He was like, "Haji Saab, please come in. Haji Saab, aap
Fake
aake
it till
baithe,
you make
please."
it, right? That's the
Exactly. It was absolutely faking it till I made it. And I was like, I've been to this storage space like 3 times in the last month or so, and nobody would, like, the guard wouldn't even let me in. And I just said like, "Oh, I'm some big shot or like Haji Saab or something," and they're just welcoming me in.
There you go.
So it was interesting. It's an interesting industry in Karachi.
I think you should just grow out your mustache, give it a bit of a twirl, and then maybe put a little bit of a spot on your head that you're a Namazi as well, and some betel nut juice on your lips before you go into these meetings to pretend as well. Have you had the chance to sit in any of these meetings where they set the rates for these products in the informal market, or not yet?
Not yet, because I'm still a very small player within the industry. So like what I've noticed is that there are 6 tiers. There's the scavengers, that's tier 1. Then there's the small shops, that's tier 2. Then there's people who are able to collect about a ton or 2 tons in a month, that's tier 3. Then there's tier 4 where people collect about 100 or so tons in a month, and then they bale it as well, or they make large compact bales as well. And then there's tier 5 that actually crushes it and hot washes it, and then there's the 6th that actually recycles it. That's how the market is structured, the recycling industry is structured in Karachi. I'm somewhere between the 3rd and the 4th, and I'm hoping to, so like I don't set the prices. The prices are set between the 5th and 6th.
And I mean,
So
6 tiers is a lot, which means that there is a lot of money here because every tier has its own profit margin that takes a cut out of this, right, to sustain the operation that they're part of.
exactly, and that's why I believe that we need an entire overhaul, and there's a whole lot of space to do that. For example, one of the things that I'm suggesting is that everybody, like there should be a law that everybody has to recycle. What that'll do is that say post-consumer waste will then not be sold to the scavengers. So that gives like people who are actually recycling, or people or like companies like myself a lot of room to actually purchase and then pay taxes on that as well, and to sell it forward. So what's happening in Dubai, for example, I believe there's a is it Diva or is it some other like company? I'm completely blanking on right now. What happens over there is, outside these big malls and these shopping areas, there's cages about 10 feet by 10 feet by 10, and everybody has to throw their cardboard in there. So it's basically a recycle bin. It's a giant recycle bin. And then this company comes in, they pick up all the cardboard, and then they process it. But what's happening over here is, a store like Imtiaz would sell the cardboard that they've already used. So of course then Imtiaz takes some of that cut, but I don't think Imtiaz puts that money on their books, because most of that is done like with cash.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, I don't want to say that Imtiaz is doing that, but I know that there are several organizations that do not put that money on
Well, I
their
mean,
books.
the Radhi paper wala who goes in the neighborhoods and everyone gives their old papers and telephone directories and things like that, they're given some cash in return. No one shows it on their income statements, right?
Exactly. So there's a lot of room for improvement.
And I think in China, for example, you can actually pay for your metro rides using recyclable plastic bottles that you put in a machine. And
Yeah.
I don't know the amount, but you put in a certain amount and you get a free ride. And I think that's,
Hmm.
again, one way to encourage you now that there is an orange line and a metro in every city except
Yeah.
Karachi. In a way,
Yeah.
you can roll that out as well. I think, this has been a fascinating conversation. I think, Ahmad, you're doing
Yeah.
some fantastic work, even though you're in tier 2 or 3. I think you'll move up really fast. And, maybe
Yeah.
there's a book to be written there at the end of this entire journey that you're on. But it's fantastic work. I continue to follow you on your Facebook, and people tuning in, do check out and follow Ahmad's work, because
Yeah.
there is always, a video or two every other day that tells you what's going on in the city of Karachi beyond the headlines
Yeah.
that you may see in the news. So keep up the
Yeah.
great work. Thank you so much for your time. It has been wonderful and informative to chat with you about the trash and garbage economy in a place like Karachi, and wish you all
Yeah.
the best.
Thank you so much. And I would suggest that anybody who wants to learn more about this should read the World Bank study called "What a Waste." They also point out how waste is related to economic growth, how waste is related to population growth, to rural to urban migration. For example, there's a McDonald's in the city, but there's no McDonald's in the village or in the countryside. So the city like makes a lot more waste, and again with economic growth, a lot more waste comes in. So countries like Japan and Singapore have successfully decoupled economic growth and waste generation, and that's what we need to move towards as well. And thank you. With that, I would say thank you, Uzair, for having me, here. And I hope that I was able to educate your viewers a little bit, and make a positive contribution towards the
No,
awareness of
this was
the issue.
wonderful. And I will
Yeah.
link the report down in the description on the podcast and on the YouTube page as well. But again, thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.